Alright guys, welcome back to Valorant News. Another bombshell arriving on the Valorant scene yesterday, just a day after TenZ officially announced his retirement from competitive play. Another domino has fallen. Sacy, there's been big rumours over the last couple of weeks, whether he's going to go to another team, whether he's going to retire. We got the answer last night. What is it with all of these legendary pro players, and many in the scene over the last few years, calling it a day very early in Valorant, but Sacy has decided that enough's enough with his competitive career, and also what does it mean for Sentinels? They now have two major players that they need to replace ASAP. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. We've got to talk Ascension, of course, because yesterday in EMEA, Apex did get the win in the end. They got over the line. An actual banger series they played against Pacific as well, and it's pretty funny, I'm not going to lie, to note that the trophy for the Ascension winners in EMEA was, as far as I'm concerned, this is it on the left hand side here, far superior to what the actual guys won in EMEA winning their own region, right? This is a banger trophy for winning Ascension, and as mini Jakes, like, we got mogged by tier 2 because this was the trophy that, like, they won early on in the season. So yeah, a bit of a joke, to be honest, but this is Apex getting the win, 3-2. It was a fascinating series. Kajak has been one of the top kind of considered players, and I'm not going to lie, if Apex hadn't have won this, at least two of those guys I think were getting picked up, maybe more, and maybe they still will be, but Apex have qualified as intended. It was like a 13-6 on the Sunset on their pick. They had to bounce back, and they did on the Abyss, and after that it continued going back and forth. Pacific then won the Haven 13-11, but they bounced back on the Lotus 13-11, clutched up massively on the second attacking half of Lotus, and then the Ascent, they dominated 13-4 in the end, because, you know, after getting that kind of attacking side on Ascent, you're probably not going to squander it. So yeah, the Turkish guys fall short. Congrats to the Apex team. They are your Ascension champions for 2024, and they will move up into the Pro League. Now, you know, we'll see where that goes. Of course, an additional team, whether roster changes will happen, whether they won't, whether someone's going to get targeted there, whether somebody isn't. And I just did quickly want to mention, because I talked about this the other day, but it's still confusing, is it not? That in Ascension, we had play-ins for the groups in EMEA, then the playoffs, then the group stage, and the playoffs. And in Americas, we have group stage playoffs. In China, we have group stage playoffs, but different style of group stage playoffs in those various regions. And then Pacific, it's double in brackets. So yeah, what's going on? And also, the overlapping here is confusing as well. I think definitely Riot needs to think about the way they do this Ascension stuff, because I try and talk about it here on the channel when it's happening, like what the games are, like to try and keep people up to speed of what's happening in Ascension. But I feel like the kind of advertising or like promotion or whatever from Riot is sometimes kind of non-existent. Like, we've not really heard much about it from that side, in addition to the fact that the tournaments, they overlap in a strange way, where, and also especially like what happened in EMEA, where Apex knew they were in the finals like a week ago, and they wait a whole week to play the finals. It's just a strange format to me, and you get EMEA concluding while Americas is still going on, and then Pacific hasn't even started yet, but China is. It's like, you know, I think it would be better if they did it in another way. But I understand that the purpose here of the tier 2 is not necessarily to gain the most viewership for like the actual matches and for Riot, but I still thought it was worthy of note, because it was a great series, and unfortunately just didn't really maybe get the love that it deserved on some level. Let's talk Americas though, because this was, well, it continues to be a tournament massively affected by problems, basically from day one. Tech delays, problems, and even nowadays when tech delays are happening, they're like, oh, can we get this moving again, guys? And then they'll start the game maybe too early, and then something else goes wrong. The production quality is terrible. It's yeah, just not a good look really at all, this Americas tournament so far. And even yesterday, right, All Night versus TSM hadn't even got underway, map 3 of it, and on day 1 it was the same thing that happened again. So this is how it looks right now in the Americas Ascension side, and TSM did not make it in the end. They went down in their critical series against All Night. This was a strange one, right, because Haven was genuinely one of the strangest maps ever. It was one of the worst halves you're ever going to see by TSM, like, or by any team in Valorant history, to be honest. They lost, like, so many clutches, it was a joke. 2v5s, like, everything under the sun they were losing. And then All Nights decided to throw it right back to them and completely threw their half as well. So I don't even know what to say about this series. It was not quality Valorant. And, TSM eventually take the win in the overtime, but then they get beat up 13-6, and then they get eventually 15-13 on the sunset. So, congrats to all Knights. But TSM were pretty tragic this tournament, I'm not going to lie. Given that there were some expectations for those guys, there was a serious downfall. And, they didn't make it. Reta Esports also just about fell short, given the fact that they started off the tournament getting completely destroyed here, 13-2, 13-7 by 2Game Esports. They did well to at least keep themselves in competitiveness, and Glories in the end did get the job done. I thought that they might, because they were pretty good, and they did get the win 13-11 and then 13-4 yesterday as necessary. So they have made it through to the playoffs there after a bad start for those boys. And it is going to be that all-Knights team, 2 Brazilian rosters, and then M80, because M80 did close out with a 5-0 stage. They took down the 2Game Esports team, and again, I think they're just getting better and better here. M80, I've said this like every series they've played, I feel like they've been slightly stronger. They've not won any series like absolutely in dominant fashion, right? They kind of were doing this at some points last year where they would just completely dominate, but this time Nismo really turned it up, and they win the Sunset in a big overtime, but they dominated the Lotus on their map pick 13-7 in the end, and they will advance to the playoffs, which looks like this in a couple of days time on the 18th of September. This gets underway, and on the 21st we are going to have our winner. M80, obviously, the favourites after that group stage performance, but I think it's going to be far from easy on what we have seen over the last couple of days. 7, of course, frustrated with the result for TSM, but let's talk about the big talking points of yesterday on the Rostermania side. Zayich here, of course, former, Carmine Corp, he actually played for them briefly, right, last year during all the drama with their roster, and he has actually decided that he's going to stay as their coach for a little while longer, despite apparent interest from Sentinels, which is pretty interesting to think about, right, because they've let go of Drew Spark, their assistant coach. Kaplan stays as their head coach. We were wondering kind of like why, because Drew Spark gets very high praise from like everyone that's worked with him, it seems. So, why would they make a change here unless they're making budget cuts and they just think one coach is fine? But now there's rumours that no, maybe they're looking at another coach. So, I don't think Kaplan is under fire potentially. So it seems more like Sentinels are at least considering whether they sign an additional assistant coach on the roster and whether it's somebody else. So that maybe tells quite an interesting story, but I guess time will tell whether that actually goes anywhere. But as we see from Sentinels today, or maybe we're going to get another one today, I don't know, but from yesterday, remain seated and a picture of the red chair again. Just to kind of talk about the story on this if you guys aren't familiar, last year when Sentinels were making every roster change under the sun, it was Kaplan that would sit down in this red chair and basically say, hey, Sen City, this is what we're going to do. And, it was never a good day for Sentinels fans when you saw this red chair. And it remains true to this day because it happened for TENS and now it's happened for Sacy. Confirmation yesterday that Sacy is going to step away from competitive play. We wondered what was going to happen here, right? And there's been rumours now for, I would say even before this season began, as to whether Sacy was going to step away at the end of the year. I think it was, especially after Pancada was no longer on the team, the question was always, does Sacy want to stay on a non-Brazilian roster for forever, right? Does he want to stay on this team? Does he want to go back to Brazil? Does he want to play with some other players? Is that part of the plan? And it seems like after a very, long and storied career on multiple rosters over the last few years, Sacy's decided that, it's probably about time to step away. Like, he could still play on a good level if he wanted to, and I think really, to me, this raises questions on exactly why we are seeing so many players who are very talented players that still have time left in their career, retiring at the top on some level. It's very rare in sports and esports that players retire at the top. They tend to get to the top, because this season was a great year for Sentinels, really. Yes, they didn't win champions, but they won an event. They're right up there. They were like the most competitive team in the Americas on average over the course of the season, right? Winning the event back in Madrid. So, and many players in multiple esports will get to a season like that, and then they'll fall off, and then eventually they'll kind of, not exactly whimper into retirement, and some people go out on a pretty good note, but it's quite rare. It's pretty rare that you see a player like TENS and Sacy in kind of back-to-back days, both retiring arguably not exactly at their peak. I mean, in Sacy's case, maybe not, but certainly on a real high, and it's good to go out that way on some level, but I also think it's somewhat concerning for the esports maybe. I think Riot has a few things to think about with exactly why a lot of these players are deciding to step away earlier than they might otherwise, because I don't think it really sends the best message, because in, multiple sports and esports you might expect players to really, love playing the game, love the competitive format of the scene, and therefore want to keep on grinding longer, even if they're not necessarily at their best anymore. That doesn't seem the case for many players in Valorant, and we've seen multiple big names retire this year. I mean, of course, we saw like Laz retire this year from the Japanese side. Sacy, of course, is gone. TenZ, of course, is gone. So wishing Sacy the absolute best, of course, in his next adventures after retiring. But yeah, one of the most accomplished players. I mean, look, world champion in 2022, Masters Madrid champion, and definitely a player I think that's going to be missed. And it means that Sentinels have a couple of serious roles to fill. They've got to fill that initiator role now. They've also got to fill the controller role, effectively where TenZ was. So what do? What's the plan for Sentinels with the players they might potentially look to bring in? We know that they've been trialling with Narrate for sure, presumably in TenZ's position. The question though is whether you could change something else around, because Jawgemo is now getting linked. World champion last year on the Evil Geniuses roster, and a player that is extremely highly rated by other pro players. Like, I think Artist was talking about this, that fans see Jawgemo and they say, yeah, he's good. But pro see Jawgemo and they say, wow, this guy makes so much space, does so much for his team, that it's definitely a player worth considering. The question, I guess, is really, like, does it work in terms of roles? Because Zekin's the duelist on the team. Jawgemo is at his best on that role, generally speaking, as well. So how do you do it? Is the idea, put so much talent together, it's going to be fine. Narrate comes in, Jawgemo comes in, replacing Sacy and TenZ. I like it. I don't know if I love it, to be honest. And I think there are some serious questions if they were to do that. But apparently, after Sacy's kind of departure and TenZ's departure officially, they are trialing Jawgemo. So they've got time, Sentinels, to find out the best possible solution. And last year when they were trialing with Gen.G, they found a very effective solution and it worked really rather well. But in this case, do we think this is for the best of Sentinels? Very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Been a bit up and down over the last couple of days in terms of scrim bucks as well. There was one scrim, of course, several days ago where Sentinels were 15-4 and M80. Another one they were down 12-5. They were also winning 8-0. They were 8-6 against someone. Cloud9 were 8-1 against NRG. So, some interesting scrims that have been happening over the last several days, and difficult to read too much into it. But Sentinels are going to trial some players. We're going to see if it goes anywhere. But yeah, wishing the absolute best for Sacy, and what another remarkable day in the history of competitive Valorant. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.